Welcome to part 2 of a series related to pre-emerge amaranth modes of action. This is Matt Montgomery, Burris Sales Agronomist. We began this series last time by describing a new resource developed by Burris, a resource that we think will help growers balance the need for weed control with a need for resistance management. We want to use that resource as a backdrop for discussing common pre-emerge modes of action. We're going to talk about those products that don't work very well on amaranths, those products that are amaranth resistance prone, and those products that are a little bit of both. A quick reminder on why we're going down this road. Frankly, we now find ourselves in a pretty tough spot, and when I say we, I mean those of us involved in agriculture. Because of over-reliance upon a limited spectrum of herbicides, only post-emerge Roundup, for instance, we know that resistant giant ragweed, mare's tail, water hemp, and now Palmer amaranth can be found in the Burris footprint. We're staring down the barrel of weeds for which we do not have good post-emergence tools. It's time, past time actually, for us to throw out additional modes of action in the field to combat this type of resistance development. Multiple modes of action mean that a weed must overcome multiple herbicide families rather than just one. And while that kind of adaptation may be possible, it is less likely. Pre-emerge products are a convenient means by which to add another herbicide mode of action to the lineup. In other words, pre-emerge MOAs, modes of action, are a necessary step in combating resistant weeds. You may remember that the color-coded charts highlighted last time reference a herbicide family's ability to ward off amaranth pigweed water hemp species. And you may also remember that Burris has developed 4 different charts. One pair of charts is for corn and the other is for beans. One chart references the mode of action family, while the other references examples of each mode of action family. Now remember, this is how the chart works. Products in the blue spot are sweet spot products. They provide exceptional control of amaranth species, and they're also deemed pretty good at warding off resistance development. As you move right, as the color of the chart transitions from purple to red, the risk of resistance development increases. As you move down, as the color again changes from purple to red, the risk of poor control increases. The lower right-hand corner of the screen is the worst spot to be in. Here, resistance is a pretty big issue, and poor control is as well. Now, we'll begin our mode of action discussion by stepping into the world of pre-emerge soybean herbicides. It just provides a nice backdrop for discussing this topic. Now, let's go all the way down to the lower right-hand corner, and let's talk about ALS products, Herbicide Resistance Action Committee, HRAC Group 2, thus the H2 in parentheses. You'll notice that ALS materials are not in the sweet spot. In fact, they're in the really bad spot. Amaranth control is pretty rough, and resistance concerns are very real. ALS materials work by inhibiting a specific enzyme in the plant. Enzymes are simply materials that allow important life-sustaining chemical reactions to occur in the plant. The acronym for that specific enzyme is ALS, and it's needed to form the cell's building blocks. If you don't have those, the plant will grow and develop improperly. Death, stunting, yellowing, and stubby root development are all symptoms associated with ALS herbicide exposure. The symptoms of this shutdown may not develop until several days after application. Now, we're providing some examples of ALS-containing products in the accompanying chart. Remember, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just meant to provide a reference point. If you're familiar with a specific herbicide listed, you now just might be a little more familiar with the herbicide family in question. ALS materials move around within the plant in pre-emerge soybean herbicide programs ALS options may include Canopy EX, First Rate, and Python, for example. Pre-emerged soybean ALS products tend to be weak on grasses and small seeded broadleaves, so the pigweeds, water hemps, lamb's quarters, nightshade, smartweed, etc. They tend to be stronger on large seeded broadleaves. We started with materials that are not well suited to amaranth management. Now let's work our way in toward the sweet spot. Let's move to some products that might be termed on the fringe. And let's start by talking about those products that might do an okay job controlling amaranth, but that also carry some real resistance concerns. We're going to lump two herbicide families together here. For the sake of making this chart workable, we're calling those two families photosynthetic inhibitors, and they belong to HRAC group 5 and 7. Photosynthetic inhibitors do exactly what the name implies. They screw up photosynthesis in the plant. Plants take the energy from sunlight and they stick that energy in a chemical battery that we call sugar. Getting energy into a chemical storage battery is a little complicated. It involves using the energy in sunlight to shake around chlorophyll molecules, using that shaking to rev up electrons, and using those revved up electrons to fuel the formation of sugars, our chemical storage batteries. Photosynthetic inhibitors attach themselves to small molecules that move electrons around in this system. Electrons are therefore not able to move because things have been messed up. The energy level goes up and up and up, but it doesn't have anywhere to go. Think of revving up an engine without having a vehicle in gear, and you begin to get the picture of what happens. Eventually, the sugar machine begins to tear itself apart. These products require light to work, and they move around within the plant. Photosynthetic inhibitors used before beans emerge can include Syncor, Linex, and Lorox, and Boundary as well. Photosynthetic inhibitors are pretty poor when it comes to grass control. They're great on some of the small seeded broadleaves, and they may even do well when set against a couple large seeded broadleaves. In corn, atrazine would be an example. Now let's move clockwise away from high resistance risk to more reduced amaranth control and low amaranth resistance risk. The topic is now a group of materials termed fatty acid inhibitors. Fatty acid inhibitors, sometimes called shoot inhibitors, are members of HRAC 15. Shoot inhibiting herbicides stop the formation of long-chain fatty acids, which will eventually create cell division problems. These materials are only active on emerging seedlings and leave established plants alone. The exact pathway by which they do this is still a little murky. These herbicides will enter the root and shoot, but they do not typically move around within the plant. Products included in this family of herbicides are Dual, Frontier, Outlook, Lasso, and a new member of the family called Zidua. Fatty acid inhibitors do a great job on annual grasses, but tend to be weak on some of the more persnickety grasses like woolly cupgrass and shattercane. With an exception or two, they tend to be fairly weak on most broadleaves. So that's our run-through on herbicide modes of action in reference to amaranth control, a tour that really focused on products that are either poor at amaranth control, products that struggle or might struggle with amaranth resistance, and products that struggle in both areas. If you're interested in looking over this resource highlighted here, we encourage you to read the March 18th issue of the Burris Buzz.